So how do we properly hold the violin? So let's find out in this video. Hello and welcome back to the in-depth violin guide, where we talk about the different techniques and tricks on how we can learn the violin more effectively. And on this video, we'll talk about the left hand positions and also the body posture. So the left hand is concerned with two main problems, which is the fingering, or how we put on the fingers, and the vibrato. The other techniques that we need to learn will require both the left and right hand to work together. So let's dive into the basics. So the relationship between the instrument and the body, arms and hands, has to allow it to be comfortably done. So we don't need any extra movements in order for us to be able to hold our instrument properly. There isn't really an exact way of holding a certain instrument because we differ in body type, body size, frame, and etc. So it should fall naturally into place, and you should be able to hold your instrument at ease but still be able to perform the tasks that are needed in order for you to play better. So let's talk about posture. In posture, how you stand or sit is not really exact. It depends on your body. The important thing to remember is that you are able to perform your tasks. It should always be natural. Okay, so I would suggest that you always try to find a position, especially if you're sitting, that your feet are firmly on the ground, because our bodies still get a lot of energy, or a lot of our movements come from the ground up. That's why we need to have our feet set on the ground for us to be able to play beautifully and correctly. We can play relaxed but not too relaxed, or we can play tense but not too tense. As long as our bodies can move freely and other movements are not hindering this free movement of our body. So as a teacher, you can check your students if their movements are quite stiff, if they are not moving properly. So as we've discussed before in another video, we can move sideways a lot. That won't restrict your not necessary movements. So we can move sideways, but not too much up and down motion, because it restricts our natural motions in bowing and in playing. It hinders the movement of our elbows, which are important, and we'll get to that later. So your body should just remain relaxed, in a state of relaxation, but still efficient enough to be able to glide around. There are many ways you can hold your instrument, as long as you're comfortable with it. So a lot of people right now are in the trend of not using any shoulder pads, but some students or some musicians can't play without one, because it's either their necks are too long or their shoulders are going down slightly, are not really built enough to put their instruments in place properly. So shoulder pad users should be aware of the shoulder pad that they use. It shouldn't touch the base of the back of the violin, because that would hinder a lot of the resonance and sound of your instrument. So you can support your instrument by using your collarbone and chin. That is what I do. And then you just need to put your chin on the chin rest, right? A lot of people tend to forget about their head placement, which is very vital in holding your instrument if you're not using, especially if you're not using a shoulder pad. So your head placement should always be, your chin should always be on your chin rest for it to be held in place securely. And now, your hands would also hold the instrument, but it should only support and not carry the whole weight of the violin. So the best way for you to be able to hold your instrument properly is to clamp it in between, but you don't need to put a lot of effort with your head. You don't need to bow down to the instrument. It should clamp in place. So if you're having trouble with that, maybe experiment with a shoulder pad or try to put your hand as a support just to try to figure out the exact angle for you, because it would differ. It would differ from one person to another. So also, you need to find the exact angle or relationship of the violin with your body. So it shouldn't be too much on the side, it shouldn't be too much in the front. So around the middle ground. But it would still differ from one person to another. So there are a lot of things you can change for it to work for you. So you can also change your chin rest, add center mounted chin rests, or chin rests that are higher if you don't want to use a shoulder pad. Now, the height of the violin shouldn't be lower than your shoulder level. Okay? Why? Because when your violin goes down lower than your shoulder, there's a tendency for your bow to slip towards the fingerboard when you're playing. And when that happens, your sound will be affected. So it's okay to go a bit higher, just never go lower. Especially your elbows would hit your body, and that would again restrict your movement. A lot will happen with the use of your elbow. So your elbow will adjust the position of your hands. Again, everything you're doing is related. So we need to be able to adjust one thing and adjust everything altogether. So let's start with the elbow going to the fingers. So elbow movement, we want it a bit towards the right of your body, going towards your body. So we want our elbows to stick in, not outward. Why? Because look, our hands will be misplaced when we try to move our elbows outward. So we move it inward. It also affects our back muscles that would trigger us to stand or sit straighter. So we are able to adjust the height of our fingers so that our fingers would be on top of our instrument and not on the side. So we can reach better different notes on the violin. So we can also do vibratos more efficiently in this position, aside from this one. Again, the elbow is not rigidly set. So make sure that you can move your elbows accordingly. So the lower the string, the more inclined to your right going your elbow. And the higher the string, a bit to the left, but it wouldn't go as far as this. It should remain, use your violin as a guide. Your hand or your elbow should remain under your instrument. So again, the elbow is used not only for the position of your fingers on top of the instrument, but also their position or angle of the tips of your fingers. So the closer your elbows are pulled in, the more tips of your fingers are used. And while you're pulling it out, the flatter your fingers become. Now, let's talk about the wrist. The wrist also affects the way your fingers move on the string. So it should not allow any sideways curve in the hand like this. And it should be held in a straight alignment with your hand. So your wrist should be aligned. You shouldn't be doing this or this too much. So it's a natural position that just drops your wrist. So it should form a straight line from your hand to your wrist. So there are times where you will need to extend your fingers forward. So when you're playing chords, you might move your wrist a bit, but it shouldn't exaggerate and overdo it. You shouldn't overdo it. And also in extensions, going back. There are times that your wrist would naturally go to this direction if you're extending back. Or if you're extending forward also. As you can see, the wrist is also moving. So, your wrist should be in a neutral position. Let's say that. And when you need to, you should move it, but you shouldn't overdo it. So the only movements they should be doing is this and this. And then neutral position. Now, hand placement. Since we have different sizes, fingers, different palm sizes, there are not really set rules to follow. But the important thing is you're not holding or clinching the neck of your instrument. Okay. So, the hand shouldn't be pressed against the instrument. No. Or here. Right? Only certain points of contact should be placed on your hands. So, a good point of contact would be the side of your thumb, this side, and the base of your index finger, which is this part. So, if you can see, the side and the base. And then, the contact with your collarbone and your head. So as you can see, I'm not lifting it up. I'm only supporting the violin. So you can adjust depending on your hand sizes. So a good rule to follow is that if your hands are big, you can lower down your position to the middle part, middle joint until here. If you're having big hands or if your fingers are too long, so that it can adjust properly. Now, if your hands are quite small, you can move it a bit higher so that your fingers are on top, as you can see. So if you're taller or have longer fingers, you can lower or higher. The important thing is that you are able to reach certain notes naturally without the need of stretching too much. Okay, now, first position placement. This is where a lot of people try to always go to the lowest position, which is almost a half position lower than your first position. Because in the normal fingerings of your first position, your first finger is not exactly at the back. So, your first note after A should be B. So, it's not really at the back. So, you should position your hands that you don't need to extend too much here, going up and also going down. So, a good rule of thumb is when you're trying to find the first position of your hand is that you can be able to play and this octave without any sort of extension, and the finger should fall right into place. So you should be able to play that octave with no problems. No? You don't need to reach. Sometimes kasi people tend to put their whole hand at the back. So first finger, they're already reaching. Okay? See? So you try to adjust your hands without the need for you to stretch too much. So it should fall right into place. Now, to be able to play B flat, you might extend down. As you can see, I'm not moving my whole hand, but just extending my fingers backwards. So I'm not at the total end of the fingerboard. So that's how you should be positioning your hands. It should be positioned in a way that it would be able to hold certain fingers without the need of extra extensions or extra movements. So the grouping of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 should fall in their natural states or natural positions. Okay. There is this shape that forms with our fingers that we should always try to achieve, especially when we're playing notes that are expected to be in that position, especially on the first position. When we say from A, La, see? We should form this sort of three-sided square with our fingers when we're trying to play the note. Okay. So, when we move forward, we extend. So, for example, B sharp, which is also Do, but we can play it with 1. Now, that three-sided square has been extended. The same thing happens with, we extend the fingers from this position to this, also with 3. How about D sharp? As you can see, we are extending that three-sided square that we're positioning. So, there's also not just finger extensions going with the use of the whole finger, but also the tips. We're trying to play sharps and flats. So when we're using fingers, our fingers, it's not really exactly the perfect square, right? There's a slight tilt on the tips on this line, right? But as we extend, it goes flatter. So almost going to a triangle position. Now, how do we put down our fingers? So, as you saw earlier, we put down the fingers directly on top of the string. Now, when we place these fingers on the violin, we try to get the fingernails to be pointing almost towards ourselves, like so. And we're aiming for the string to touch a little bit from the center of your fingertips to a bit to the left. So when we try to put down our fingers, it should look like this. Okay. So almost at the leftmost part, not on the rightmost. Okay? Because that would give us the stability that we need in order for us to play the notes more accurately, because there's less contact. You just need a small amount of that tips of our fingers to touch the string. So whether you're playing on E string, on A, D, or G. It also helps with our vibrato that we would talk about in maybe a few more videos after this one. So it's not always standing up. You can also play slanted, especially if we're extending. The one thing we talked about earlier. Now, the base of the knuckle still acts as the one when we're trying to hit notes or stop the strings. So it should always come from here, not just with the fingers, but from the base of the knuckles. So again, in our left hand position, it's not just concerned with our hand actually. It's concerned with this whole part of our body, coming from your shoulders, going to your fingers. Now, the position of the thumb, it moves differently because we're not using the thumb to play the strings, right? So the thing about the thumb is that you shouldn't clutch your instrument. So you shouldn't hold your violin like so. So the thumb is only for support and helps with the movement of a counter pressure, giving it for your fingers. But it shouldn't act as something that would hinder the movements of your fingers. It takes away the pressure from your fingers when they touch the string. Okay? But it shouldn't absorb it enough that it would cause you to choke the neck of your instrument. So your thumb shouldn't stick too much out because it would also affect its position on the strings. And also, there should always be a gap underneath. So you try to find the angle of your thumb in order for you to be able to play relaxed but still firm. So if you have a small hand, it's not an issue if you can't place it too much on the side. You can actually place your thumb underneath if you need to get more leverage so that you can climb up over on the fingerboard. So your thumb can adjust depending on the need. So you can move it a bit higher so that your hands can go down, or a bit lower so that your hands can go up. So these are the basic positions that you can use in order for you to position your hands fairly well on the violin. If you're starting out trying to play, these are things that you need to consider when you're trying to find out what's the best position for you. Again, all these suggestions are not exact. So it really depends on your body and how your body reacts to certain changes in positions. Well, I hope you learned something new today and it would help in your study of this instrument. On the next video, we'll still talk about the left hand and other movements that are needed in order for you to be able to play beautifully. So if you have any comments and if you have any questions, just like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. And I hope to see you on the next video.